time here. Today is October the 15th, 2005, and we're here at the home of Mr. and Mrs. Dale Barnaby in Nunn, Colorado. And here with our student group are, and you give us your name and where you're from, please.
My name is Kevin Coors. I'm from Louisville, Colorado.
Louisville.
My name is Motaki Honda. I'm from Tokyo, Japan.
I'm Annie Milbar, and I'm from Louisville, Colorado.
I'm Danny Pendleton, and I'm from Louisville, Colorado.
Troy James Fuller from Chicago, Illinois.
Okay, so Dale, if you could just tell us a little bit about Nunn and about what it's like around here.
You want me to start from when the town started? And
Yeah.
What Nunn's name and all that? There was before Nunn came, they had a little settlement out here about a mile called Maynard Flats. And a fellow by the name of Tom Nunn, south of Nunn, along the railroad track, had I guess he lived in a little shack or something down there on a homestead. Anyhow, they had a bunch of tumbleweeds come in and got under the railroad track bridge down there and caught fire and burned the bridge up. So Tom Nunn, he ran up the track and stopped the passenger train from coming down and wrecking in that bridge. And back in those days, the railroad owned every other section. So to be nice to Tom Nunn, why they gave this section of ground for the town and named it Nunn after Tom Nunn. And they donated this section of ground here. So Nunn is a full section. And this was in 1905. And then they started businesses here. And they had a real estate office they put Watts Nunn Grow on the side of it in 1905. And now it's on the water tower. They still got Watts Nunn Grow. So it hadn't grown too much. But they did have a town site building, and a hotel, a pool hall, grocery store, post office, butcher shop, and a library, and cream station, and then the barber shop north of that, all on Main Street. And then south of that were Turner Hardware and the printing office, and I don't know what the other was, Nell Green's and that. And across the street from that was the lumber yard and corset shop, Willie's Diesel and shop, and a drugstore. And then there's Foster's Garage on the north side of the street, and there was another grocery store next to it. And there was a building tore down before we came to town, and I don't know what was in it. My sister said it was a rooming house where they could rent rooms, but I don't know that for sure. So that's how Nunn got started. And then, oh yeah, got a church. It was built in 1905. I've got pictures of stuff you guys can see. And then the government decided that they would run irrigation ditches from the mountains down, where all the little towns up and down here all were irrigated. Well, Nunn was to get their water out of Wyoming, the Laramie River, and through politics, and they did build the ditch with horses and drays, and go that way.
Hey, Dale, can you explain what a dray was, how that worked?
I don't know. I think it was just it it was kind of like we called them slips. It was a metal thing with about so wide that had handles on the back of it, and it was probably this big a square, and horses would pull it, and that way they'd dig the dirt out, and then they'd take it up and dump it out.
So it was a scoop, a horse-powered
Yeah,
scoop of some
horse-powered
kind.
scoop was what it was. But they built that ditch, and there's still part of it over on this end of town. And they ran water in it, I think twice, is what I found out in the newspapers. And then through politics, Wyoming kept the water in Wyoming, and none never got the water except to fill the Magruder. They put a reservoir out on the end of it, out here about 8 miles. They called it Magruder Reservoir. And when the water quit, then all the businesses in Nunn started leaving, and people started moving out. So that's why Nunn didn't grow, I guess, and the county never turned into a irrigating country.
What was your name?
That part of Nunn, if you want to ask any questions about it, well,
Okay, well, who wants questions? Start at the beginning.
Yeah, actually, can you tell about your parents and grandparents, please?
my parents,
Can you tell us about your parents and your grandparents, please?
my parents came from Basco, Illinois, which is north of Quincy, in 1918. And the reason they came here was because my mother's brother had had
TB.
TB, yeah. And they brought him out here because the air is so heavy back there, moisture in it. They brought him out here where it's drier. And he lived to be 75 years old, so it worked on him. But we had, my mom and dad had 10 kids. And got pictures of them there. And my dad was a mechanic, and he owned a thrash machine. Back in those days, they didn't have combine. They had thrash machines, and they made bundles out of the wheat, and then they would put them in trucks and haul it in and put it in the thrash machine and thrash it, blow the straw out the back and make straw stacks, and the wheat would come out, and they'd put it in trucks and gunny sacks. Anyhow, and he also took a 1928 Buick and made a bundle loader out of it, so we didn't have to take a pitchfork and throw them into the trucks. We just run that bundle loader under the shocks and put them in the trucks. And he invented several things. I've got a newspaper in there that says, I guess a great-great-great-grandfather was bodyguard over Lincoln's body when he was shot. And then my dad's great-grandfather was John Deere's partner. And he was also an inventor, and he invented the plow and stuff. And he made John Deere's first plow. And he sold out and went to California for the gold rush. They figured the Indians got him, never heard from him again. And nobody ever heard from him after. So they figured the Indians got him before he got to California. That's, yeah. That's a story of my family, and my mom's family were named Triboulet, Triboulet. And that's French. I guess way back they came from France. But don't know too much about them. Her family's the one that's been here the longest. Her dad was the rural mail carrier. What year did that start? 1921?
He was the
And
first one.
he was the first rural mail carrier that took the mail out into the country and delivered it. And I think the mile was a 130-mile route.
No, it was 67 then.
Oh, start with, yeah.
Mhm.
Anyhow, them old cars in 1921, took a long time to go 100 miles with old Model Ts. But he ran the mail route for 38 years before he retired. And then she became his substitute, and she substituted 25 years, and then she carried the mail steady for 5 years, and her route was 130 miles. And so she retired from the Postal Service. But,
I'll let Nora say it.
What was your first school experience? Oh, and
the first what?
school experience?
Well, I went to Purcell when I was 6 years old, which is 5 miles south and 9 miles east of here. And then when I was 13, we came to Nunn. I went to the schoolhouse right up here a block. It's a home now. And she was I was in the 7th grade when we came. We was in the same grade. So we went to school together. And then in 1951, they built another schoolhouse over here. And it's now the community building. But I think 68 or 70, somewhere in there, they consolidated the school here, and all the kids go to Alt and Pierce, which is 8 miles down the road to Alt. But even the kids from the state line have to come to Alt. I have a list of the schoolhouses that were here when we were kids in this area, from Wellington to Grover to Pierce, or to Briggsdale back to Pierce. And there were 23 schoolhouses that are no longer being used. Back in those days, there was 23 more schoolhouses.
They
But
were
they can,
just one-room houses out in the
Yeah.
country.
but first, well, they consolidated Carr and Dover first and brought them to Nunn, and then later, while they consolidated and took them all to Alt Pierce. So they're huge schools now. When I graduated, there was one girl and myself in the senior class, and one girl in the junior class. Of course, it was during World War II, and everybody that was old enough, 18, went to the service. And I graduated when I was 17, so I didn't have to go to. And then I was 4F, physically unfit, because I had pimples. The war was about over too by then. But one reason they consolidated, they didn't consolidate. Nunn was not an accredited school. If you graduated here, you had to take a big test to get into college. But if you went to Pierce, 5 miles down the road, you could, it was accredited school, and they could go right into college. What the difference was, I don't know. But so her last year, she went to Pierce and graduated from Pierce. But that was our school. But we played Wellington over here was the same size town as we were, so we played them, Pierce and Alt and Briggsdale and Grover. We played all them basketball and baseball. We didn't have a football team. But we enjoyed school.
And then tell them about the fire department. It started when?
I we Tyler wrote yeah,
Yeah.
but I put up a lot of cattle.
Yeah.
I raised quite a few of those out. What do you call them?
Herefords?
No,
You had Galloways.
Oh,
Galloways.
oh, Galloways. Oh.
Okay.
We did.
I'm Danny, and our main research question was around agriculture and like the history of agriculture, and so we were wondering how is your family related to all the agriculture around Nunn and the growth of the town with agriculture.
My family wasn't into the agriculture, but this whole town was. And most everybody had cows and pigs and chickens. Like I said, she was raised in the house 1 block south of here, on the south. And they had 3 cows, 2 cows, 3 hogs, and 3 sows, and those hogs had babies every year. And then they had a chicken house, and there were about 50 chickens in the chicken house, and they raised them all right there on, and they had 4 lots, which is 50, that'd be 200 feet by 150 feet. And they had all that stuff right there. And then the people in the country all raised cattle and milk cows, and then after the 30s, after the Depression days, instead of trying to raise corn and beans and stuff on the dry land, because they just didn't get enough rain, they switched and started raising wheat. And this whole country was wheat country for years and years. And there are still some wheat fields around in a few places, but most everybody now has what they call CRP. The government pays them not to raise wheat. Yeah. Pays them so much money, and the wheat ground just lays dormant. And so there's not much wheat in the country anymore. But this last year, the drought was so bad and people were still raising cattle, they would let the people with CRP, the people could put their cattle on there and they could rent it out so they put cattle on it nowadays. So it is different than it was farther back. But when I was 15, I went out to the Canode place and lived with them, and I lived in they had 2 little boys, and I lived in a bunkhouse. It was the summertime. I slept in the bunkhouse, but I ate with them. So I got my room and board and $10 a month, and we milked 6 cows every night and every morning, and then the trucks would come and pick the milk up in 10-gallon cans and haul it in. So I did that all summer out there, and then after we'd milked the cows, then we'd go out. He was still trying to raise beans, and we'd hoe the weeds out of the beans in the daytime. And we thought that was a pretty good job. The times have changed a little bit since then, but there were a lot of farmers. Almost every farmer who lived out of town raised 6 or 8 cows and milked them, and then the trucks would come pick up the milk cans and haul them to town.
Not on the prairie. The government bought all that ground and people had to move.
Yeah, that was when the Depression came. Everybody had homesteaded in clear around the country around. Couldn't make a living because there wasn't enough rain for no grass, and they couldn't raise crops. So the government bought the ground from them and moved them to some other place, and most of them from the area out here on what they call Pawnee grasslands went to Fruita and over your direction over there in the mountains. And so they relocated a lot of people here. And this house we're sitting in was one of them that was 9 miles east and about 12 miles east and a couple of miles north of here. And so we couldn't borrow any money to build a house in town when we were married 60 years ago, so we went out and bought this house for $500, and people in town ships us, put it on steel wheels and pulled it into town with tractors and set it down here for $500. So we had the house set here. We did give $200 for the ground it's sitting on. And it didn't cost anything to tie onto the Nun-Town water. And so we ran the water in and put running water in it and everything. When we got through with this house, we had $2,500 in it.
Oh yeah, that was a big price.
Yeah, that was a lot of money. Well, I was manager of the Denver elevator, and I was working. I made $160 a month. Is what I made. So times have changed. I did forget to tell them that we did have a train depot here in Nunn, and there was a depot agent there, and mail would come in on the train, and they'd put it in mail sacks, and when they went through town, the train didn't even stop. They were passenger trains. The train didn't even stop. They'd just throw those things out on the ground, and then the postmaster or people here would go get it and take it to the post office and sort the mail. And then afternoon, they had hookups, kind of like that's a railroad switch out there, but they had a thing with hooks on it, and the postmaster here would take the mail and put it in a sack and put it on that hook there, and as the train went by at 50 miles an hour, it'd grab that thing off the hook and swing it in, and they would sort the mail on the way to Cheyenne or Greeley, whichever way they were going.
I think I saw that in a movie one time.
They did it here.
You could mail a card here and want it to go to Pierce 5 miles south. They would pick it up here, and then by the time they got to Pierce, they had it sorted and put it off at
It's all
Pierce.
set
Put it
to
in
That's
go.
pretty
bag at
fast.
That is pretty fast.
Especially
Yeah.
from years ago.
Small
when we had
towns,
horses.
there wasn't much
Yeah,
to
it
sort.
wasn't that-
One piece of mail each.
Yeah,
That's kind of interesting.
yeah. I was postmaster here for 20 years, and we had 53 boxes. Is how many boxes we had in town. And then she was a rural carrier, so I think we had about 70 on the rural route out what she delivered. But
It's probably double that now.
yeah, it's double that now.
Ever did hear of a guy named Bert Genoway, did you?
Genoway?
Yeah,
Yeah. Heard of him.
that was the family we had.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I found some of your family
Yeah.
in the newspaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We find that old stuff once in a while.
I got a phone call yesterday from people from Colorado Springs, Pueblo. Called a fellow here in town and said that some of their family used to live here and died, and wondered if we could find the obituary. I found it. They gave me the date, and it was in the Nunn News in 1908. So I made copies of it, and they're going to come get it. What else you guys need to know?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you, I'm Troy by the way, if you could just say a little bit about the Great Depression and how it affected town morale and just like the general way of living of, you know, how people went about their days.
You probably know more about this town, because I didn't live here yet. But
Well, I was, let's see, Depression was 33, wasn't it? I wasn't very old. I was born 26.
9.
And I don't remember, my dad had was a mail carrier, so he made good money for that time. So I always had running water, and I didn't know what hard times were when I was a kid. So, but there was a lot of people families that we knew that lived out that they had to get money from the welfare to buy groceries, and
we were one of
Mhm.
We were one
Yeah,
of
the Barnabys were, they were a big family and they lived clear out of Purcell, which was
yeah.
20
And,
miles, so.
Even though my dad was a mechanic, he, during the Depression, people didn't have enough money to pay him very much for fixing their automobiles and stuff. But 10 kids, and my mom had 10 kids, never had running water in the house until she moved in this little trailer right here on our place. She finally got running water, but the kids were all gone from home. She never had running water in the house, never had electricity until we came to Nunn when I was 13, and I was about the middle one, so that was in 1939. And they had, tell me, got Alzheimer's. What'd they call it?
Welfare?
It was welfare, but they didn't call it that. My dad did get a job on the WPA, they called it. And the WPA built what is our museum here now. When they built it, it was a town hall and also the basketball court for the school. The schoolhouse was up here, and we walked down here to play basketball in the basketball court. But WPA paid the money to build that, paid the laborers.
Wasn't that during the Depression?
Yes, during the Depression. 1933 was when this,
And it's
was
made out
built.
of cement.
and they built one in Bridgedale also at the same time. So my dad did work on WPA in between thrashing time. See, all the thrash machine he ran was just to thrash the grain in the irrigated. And so we would go down to every irrigated farm and thrash the grain every year. So that just lasted from July through the last of September. Thrashed grain and beans, just two different thrash machines. But he raised 10 kids, and we didn't have much to eat. I remember we had a blizzard one time when we lived east of Purcell, and the rural mail carrier from Purcell had